We're going to be in 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23 today, and we're going to go through this passage. But before we do that, I just wanted to throw some stats out and just kind of set it up where we're going. So according to Pew Forum, I'm going to take a drink too. According to Pew Forum, which is a website that does surveys, and I know people lie on surveys, but I can't control that. So according to Pew Forum, about 43% of Americans claim to be Christians. That's Catholics, JWs, Protestants, everyone. So just Christian faith, Mormons, everyone just rolled up into one. So about 4/10 of the country, somewhere in there, a little more than that, claims to be Christian. And so that's not great. And we've seen a steady decline of that through starting with the 60s and 70s and going until now. So that's really not great, especially when before then our nation historically has had a respect for Christianity, and most people would have claimed to have been Christians in the 40s and 50s and stuff like that. So that's not great. But because I'm Tex-centric, I looked up the stats for Texas. About 77% of Texans claim to be Christians. Oh, right? You know, yes, that's right. That's my country. So now that's great, right? Woohoo! But so only 42% of the 77% say that they go to church every week. And then the next stat down is like 23% say that they go at least once a month or yearly. So that's a huge drop off there. And so what the real point of it is that we all know people who are Christians, but maybe they're not Christians. They say they're Christians and we're cool with Jesus, right? But they're not Christians. And then we'll have people around us that are not, they claim they're believers, but they don't live like it, right? And then we'll have just people around us who just aren't believers at all. And so that's the real point here. Sometimes people will say they're Christians, but they're actually not. And they're kind of cool with Jesus, but then when life gets hard, we don't really follow him, you know? So really the message today is about how to reach those people, how to reach the unbeliever, right? And so we all know unbelievers, right? Let's be real about and this stat about, let's just say, anyone who doesn't go to church weekly. I'm not saying you have to go to church weekly to be a Christian, but the Bible does say you need to go to church and be in a community. So let's just say about 6 out of every 10 people at your workplace or in whatever field you're in. So if you're in your workplace, if you're out and about at Walmart, H-E-B, wherever, about 6 out of 10 people won't know Jesus. And so you've all worked with that coworker, right, that doesn't know Jesus. Like, I know non-Christians. I know people who don't accept Jesus, right? So I know them, but do I actually know them? Do I know about their families? Do I know about their lives? Do I know about their desires and their dreams and their goals? Do I actually know non-Christians? Do I have a relationship with them? And that's what Paul is talking about here in the passage. So if you could go ahead and pull that up, Don, I'm going to read it behind me, so that way I make sure we have the same version here. Oh, there we go. Oh, this is difficult. Oh, there's step. Okay. So 1 Corinthians 9:19. If I fall, I'm falling in the drums, so that'll be sure to break my fall a little bit. That'll be good. So 1 Corinthians 9:19 says, even though I'm a free man with no master, I've become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. And now when I live with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law, even though I'm not subject to the law. And I did this so that I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. When I was with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law, so that I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. And when I'm with those who are weak, I share in their weakness. For I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save someone. So, 23. That's right. There you go. One more. So I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. So We all know non-Christians, right? And that's what Paul's talking about. He's like, when I'm with the Jews, I act like a Jew. I follow the Jewish law. I eat kosher. That's to not offend the Jews and to reach them more easily. And then when I'm with the Gentiles, I don't turn down the food that they're offering me because I want to reach them more easily as well, right? Because I don't want to offend anybody. And so he says here, that passage there is like, that kind of makes us a little bit uncomfortable if you think about it, because this was a huge deal. Do we need to eat Jewish? Do we need to follow the Old Testament law? Do we need to do these things in the early church? So this is a huge deal. And really the point is that we need to get out of our Christian bubble. And Paul eventually ends up writing to Peter, the Apostle Peter, and saying, like, you're throwing out people that are Christians because you're following the law so harshly. And so we need to get out of our Christian bubble. But what do I mean by that? Everyone has, well, what is a Christian bubble? This is great Christianese, right? But what does that mean? So what I mean by that is a lot of times we're Christians, right? And sometimes people are Christians and they're not, but other times people are Christians and they're like the holy Christians, and they dress up for church on Sundays. They read their Bibles every day. They're praying all the time. They do all these things. But when stuff gets hard, or when people around them are going through a hard time, they just hole up in their like little Christian bunker with all their other Christian friends, and they don't actually talk to anyone who's not a Christian because they might cause me to stumble. And quite frankly, that's not the gospel. The gospel says to go into all nations and make disciples of everyone, whether they're Christian or not. And how are you going to make a disciple of someone who's already a Christian? So we need to get out of that mindset of, I just want to hang around my select group of friends and my little group of people, and we need to expand our horizons and go meet some people or interact with some people and love and care about people who maybe don't agree with us on everything. You don't have to agree with someone just to love them. You don't have to do that, And so we should be missionaries in our workplace. Missionaries go, and in other countries, missionaries will literally learn a whole new language. And sometimes missionaries will go and find a language and then have to learn that language from scratch. I believe David Livingstone did that. Don't quote me on it. But David Livingstone was a missionary and went to Africa. And so you have to learn a whole lot of different languages. And if we're following Christ, we should have that same fervor and passion and desire to see lost people come to Jesus. And we need to kind of bust out of our comfort zone and just open up a little bit to those around us. But we don't want to, forget learning a new language. We won't look up the score to the Raiders game last night. How long does that take? 30 seconds. Look at the score, see how many stats David Carr had. Derek Carr, David's his older brother, side note. But look Derek threw 3 picks last night. How hard is that to look up and then walk into work the next day and say, man, tough game last night. Yeah, I saw Derek threw three, So that relationship, right? We don't have to speak a foreign language. We just have to speak the language of whatever people are speaking in our workplace. And then that can connect you to people. And then you find out you care about weird, nerdy things. Like a lot of people at my place of work, they like Dungeons and Dragons. So now I've learned about dice. It's weird, but that's okay, right? It doesn't hurt me any, right? It doesn't hurt me. But I'm learning their language and I'm connecting with them, and just being able to talk and listen to them, that makes them feel connected to me, and then that allows me to open up about my life and open up to share the gospel. So we need to look for opportunities like a missionary would, right? Instead of going and learning a new language, like seriously, it's not hard to get the ESPN app and be like, one of my coworkers is a Raiders fan. Oh, the Raiders won, and you can just talk about that and just talk about stuff that they care about. And so if we just listen to others, then we can talk about a relationship, right? We can talk about their life, their families, where they're from originally, or where they grew up, what they love to do in their off time. It's just building that relationship with others and kind of letting our Christian... A lot of times I feel like, this is not a part of the sermon, a lot of times I feel like we as Christians put on this facade of holier than thou-ness, and we're like, oh, I'm a Christian, so I don't do anything ever. No, but I found that if you drop, I don't have fun because I'm a Christian. I found that if you drop that Christian, that Christian mask that a lot of us put on, honestly, and you're just brutally honest with especially with my coworkers. I'll just look at them. They'll be like, how are you doing today? Man, I'm going through a rough time. Okay, so now I've just opened up, and that is if I've opened up, I'm going through a hard time. So now if they ask me, hey, what's going on? And I tell them honestly what I'm struggling with, whether they're Christian or not, most of the time they'll actually care and listen. But then guess what? I've had people come up to me and say, hey man, I really need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh goodness, I hurt this person. And they'll come, man, my wife and I were really having a hard time. And, she's not been faithful to me. And, these are conversations that I've had. And if I wasn't open and honest with these people that I work with, and if I hadn't loved them, people wouldn't walk up to me and say, hey man, I don't know how to say this, but my life's just a mess. That's just the thing. And the other thing is we don't have to agree with everything that people do around us to love them. So I don't have to agree with all of my gay, lesbian, bi, whatever, straight coworkers. I don't have to agree with their actions. But here's something that I can agree with. I've had coworkers come to me. I had one coworker specifically, and he walked up to me, and I'm like, hey man, what's wrong? And he happens to say he's gay, which, okay, it's work, so like, I love you. I disagree with that, and I disagree with it biblically, but here's the deal. I'm going to love you. I don't care. So he walks up to me and goes, hey man. I'm like, what's going on, Kevin? He's like, man, I'm having a really hard time. I think my boyfriend's cheating on, and breaks down crying. Okay, so that there is a moment of where we should have empathy and compassion and love for that person. And that's not the moment where we break out our family King James Bible and whack them upside the head. I just lost my earpiece. That's not the moment where we break out the King Jimmy and go, gay's wrong. We don't do that because that person's having a moment there, and they're having a very emotional moment. And so in that moment, it's better to come alongside them and say, man, that really sucks. And I understand your pain, and that hurts, and I hurt with you. It's better to do that than to say, well, if you weren't, than to throw out a bunch of statistics about infidelity among the homosexual community. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to them. They don't care about that in that moment. What they care about is, are you there for me, and do you love me? Do you genuinely, honestly care about me enough to stop what you're doing for 5 minutes, look me in the face, and just hug it out with a bro, And that's the truth. And because of the relationship, because of the actions that I chose, he and I are still friends to this day. I'm so thirsty. So, just because I don't agree with his actions or his stuff, right? I can still love him, and I can still love him through his mess, and that's okay. And then later on, it'll give me an opportunity to eventually share the gospel with him. And that's the end goal, guys. The end goal is to bring everyone into heaven with us. So that's point one. Point one is get out of your Christian bubble. Just get out of it. Break out of it. So, yeah, Hope Carrier. If you're in our men's group, we went through a series, and it was, I forget the guy's name, but he's a pastor in Dallas. And basically he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that if you're a Christian and you walk into a room, instantly you are the leader because you have the hope that everyone else looks for, and everyone else is going to look for the hope of Jesus because the world won't fulfill that hope and that longing that they have in their heart. If you're really, or not if you're really old, I'm only 20, but if you're like me and you remember the donut man, he said that, so God's like a donut hole and he fits in our anyway, that was really, really bad. So point number 2, we need to de-weird Christianity. Oh, so we got out of our Christian bubble, right? But we need to de-weird Christianity, and we need to get out of this mindset of, and get other people out of this mindset of, oh, I'm going to whack you upside the head with a Bible because I'm a Christian and I'm better than you. And that's what a lot of times people expect us to do. So we need to shift the views of those around us from, oh, Christians hate us and Christians are just angry and they're backwards and they're old and set in their ways, to no. Some Christians are like that, and sometimes they have reasons for that. I think a lot of people here can say that we've been hurt by the church, myself included. I mean, we've all had hurts and pains from the church, right? So maybe they had a really bad experience with the church, right? So maybe they're callous to that. Or maybe they've turned on the news and they've seen the Westboro Baptist picketing whatever, and maybe they're turned off to that just, oh, Christians are mean and hateful and spiteful, or maybe they just never have met a Christian. And so all the information they've seen is third hand, and they're like, oh, well, Christians are like this and Christians are like that, but they've never actually met one. You may be the first Christian that these people actually meet. And so they think a lot of times it's not they versus us. It's we're all humans, right? And I want to bring everyone into our family. So when I say they, it's not us versus them. It's I want to bring you in, right? It's like I want you to be a part of this family. The unbeliever, right? A lot of times unbelievers. I'm going to stop saying they because that does convey the us versus them. Unbelievers think that Christians are judgmental, and one of the best ways I can set this up is, okay, so I'm at work, right? And when I'm at work, my cross necklace, I don't know if y'all can see it, my dad gave me this, but my cross necklace, I never take it off. Fun fact. But my cross necklace was showing, I guess, and I was working, doing my job, minding my own business. And someone walks up to me, and I guess she had seen it or something. I don't really know. But she walks up to me. This is my first interaction with this person. She walks up to me, looks me dead in the face, and goes, "I'm a lesbian." And, I'm doing my job. So, in this specific moment, I really don't care. At all. Cool. Can you put chicken down faster than other people? That's all I really care about. But she comes up to me and she's like, "I'm a lesbian." Boom. Oh, man. Ed's gonna hurt me, man. I'm sorry. Oh, hey, we're back. I know. We need to duct tape this stuff to me. We need to gram proof it. She goes, "I'm a lesbian." And then she expects this, I'm convinced that she expected this Christian reaction to, me to spontaneously combust like I'm the wicked west of the West and I just got hit with water or something, And I just turned and I'm like, okay, good for you. I don't really care right now. Can you please go do your job? So she came and she was expecting this harsh, this judgment, this course of abrasiveness, right? But then I was just like, okay, that's cool, whatever. I don't care. And so that took her off guard. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she went and did her job. But because I didn't turn to her and I wasn't like, oh, that's a sin, and like I've said, I didn't throw the Bible at her. She could then, later on, throughout this course of months and weeks of talking and working together in relationship, they were like, "Hey, can you give this person a ride?" To which I was like, "Sure, I'll give her a ride," And so, but because if I had imagined how different that would be if I had instantly said, "Well, I'm a Christian," but instead when we were just kind of, okay, that's your sin, that's your sin, you can deal with it. I think you're more than that. I think you are more than your sexuality. That's what I believe. I believe God created you perfectly, and I believe that He created you for a greater purpose than for you to walk around waving your sexuality and your on the stake, That's the God's honest truth, is I don't see that. I don't really care. What I care about is, are you saved or not? Do you have Jesus or not? Because that's what matters at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you're straight by, whatever. I don't really care. But are you seeking after Jesus? And am I helping you seek after Jesus So that's one thing too, is the world expects us to be this way. And then when we're like, I do care. For me, that was valuable information because I knew then that she expected a certain thing from me. And then I was just going to love her. I was just going to love her as much as I could, And that's a decision that we as Christians have to make, to kind of just de-weird and de-amplify. When we go into situations when, because I have 3 brothers and we're all various levels of intense. So in our family, we use this phrase, it's called de-escalate. De-escalate. So if your brother's mad at you and I'm mad at him, and let's just say brother number 3 comes in, he does not need to come in here and just blow it up even more. If you're going to come in, you need to bring it down, bring the emotion down. And that's a responsibility that we have as Christians, because they have these expectations that we're just going to hate, and we really hate all non-Christians, and if you disagree with us, right? But we need to bring that expectation down to, no, I love you, and I don't agree with you, but that's okay. And I can love you through that disagreement. And because of that, you can have an opportunity to share the gospel. If you start out with, I love you, and that's not important to me, I don't really care. If you come at them where, I don't really know how to phrase that. If they're expecting you to do one thing, and then you just deflect, and you're like, no, that's fine, We just love them through their sin. We don't love their sin, but we love them in spite of their sin. So that's point 2 is we need to de-weird Christianity and just, it's okay. It's okay to sin, Not that we accept your sin, but you're sinful. That's okay. We all sin. But can you follow Jesus? Do you look after Jesus? Do you long after Jesus? That's the most important thing. So point 3 is whatever it takes. And I found that a lot of Christians, or people who claim to be Christians, are more like the Pharisees than actual Christians. I found that they will do whatever they want, whenever they want, and it's okay because I'm saved. And you know what? I go to church every Sunday and I read the Bible. There have been times where I've seen co-workers break down crying, and I've seen these people who claim to be Christians people in their family are on staff at other churches, so I don't want to bash them, but they claim to be Christians and they just walk by somebody who's crying, like the story in the Good Samaritan. And I'll tell you, nothing hurts Christianity more than when you see someone hurting, or when you see someone in a very intimate moment of just brokenness, whatever it is. And I'm not saying you have to be the most loving, caring, lovey-dovey person, but what I'm saying is if you just literally look at the person and keep walking, that's not what Jesus would do at all. And I don't care. Jesus told the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan. The least you can do is say, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here with you. And I understand, we're in a workplace environment and you have a job to do, but the least you can do is stop for 10 seconds and say, I'm here for you. And as a Christian, not only is that our responsibility, but that's what Jesus expects of us. Because the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus doesn't praise the quote-unquote Jewish leaders who are holier. Who does he praise? He praises the Samaritan, because the Samaritan went above and beyond to take care of this guy who was beaten on the side of the road. And so many times we see people who are beaten on the side of the road, and we not only do we not just walk past them, we kick them on the way by. Because, well, you sinned, that's why you got there. Seriously. Come on, guys. Where's the love? Where's the love? And I'm not saying that we have to be loving all the time. There does need to come a point where you have to tell them the hard truth. But you're never going to get to tell them the hard truth if you don't start with love. And that's God's honest truth. And if we don't love people, none of this junk matters. Paul says that. Paul says that about four chapters later, 4 chapters after this. Paul says, everything I've done, and I've not loved, I'm nothing but a clanging cymbal. I'm a rusty gate. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Because if I don't love, no one else will remember me, 1. 2, if they do remember you, it's not a good thing. And 3, it makes the rest of Christendom look bad. And see, we as Christians, right, I don't think there's anyone in here who would intentionally kick someone as they're walking past them. But we as Christians now have to fight that stigma. So when you as a Christian come along and you're like, I don't want to deal with that. I ain't touching that. That's gross. So when we do that, and we've all done that in our lives, that's the truth, because we're not perfect. We're sinful beings. We've all done that at various times. But when we do that, not only are we hurting us, because we carry the name Christian, you might as well get it tattooed on your forehead. If you say you're a Christian and you do that to someone else, it not only hurts that person, it hurts the rest of the body. And we're a body of Christ. So if one part of the body does something, the rest of the body has to compensate for it. And most Christians aren't mean, spiteful, or like the picketers, you know. Most Christians aren't like that. But when the world sees Christians, that's what the world thinks of, because that's the ones that have hurt them. So we have to fight that. And, you know, has it really ever hurt somebody just to, I'm not saying you got to hug them, but just say, man, I love you and I'm here for you. You know, I think anyone can do that. I don't really care what your love language gift is or whatever your personality is. I think anyone can look someone else in the face and say, I don't know what's going on. I care about you though, and I love you enough to stop and just be with you. And sometimes silence is best. That's what I found. I had another coworker, and he had one of his grandparents die, and the thing I did was I didn't say a word. I just said, hey, what's going on? He's like, my grandma died. And I just put my head on his shoulder and sat there for about 5 minutes. We didn't say anything. You know, you just sit there in silence. And you know what? He doesn't know this, but while I'm doing that, I'm praying for him. I'm praying for his family. And I'm just there in the moment with him in the middle of the brokenness, just like Jesus was. And you know, I'm just there in the pain, and I'm feeling it with him, you know? And that hurts. But here's the deal. Then, because of that, we have a relationship, and now I can go up to him and I can say, hey, you know God's got a place for you in heaven, right? After the fact, of course. You don't tell them that during it, but you have to build that relationship before you can get there. A lot of times we as Christians want to get there, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. We want to get to the point where we just tell them the hard truth first. But if you tell them the hard truth first, they're going to be calloused, and they won't want to hear anything else you say. We have to love them and bring their guard down first. So whatever it takes, and just because others are sinning doesn't mean we have to sin with them. Like I said earlier, we have to love them in spite of their sin. And, you know, we need to look for opportunities to share the gospel. Do I want to listen to everyone? I don't know if everyone's seen The Office. A lot of people have seen The Office here, and Kelly from The Office is really annoying, but we've all kind of had that coworker that only talks about their relationships, and you really don't care. But you know, how much does it hurt you to just sit there and listen? What does that do? I mean, how hard is that? We need to be missionaries in our places of work, in our recreational circles, and whatever we do, we need to be missionaries and look for the opportunities. Because again, when someone comes to you with, I don't think we think of like, oh, relationships, that's not a deeply emotional thing. But if you've been in a relationship, or you're married, or you've dated, or anything like that, it is a really deeply emotional thing. That's a lot of you in this relationship, you know? So they're coming to you with this thing that is deeply emotional to them. Now, it may not mean the price of beans in China to you, but who cares? So they care. That's what matters. So just listen. Just listen and talk with them, and there's nothing wrong with that. And people will love you for that. And then you can share the gospel. And then you can say, hey, I'm going to church this Sunday. Do you want to come with me? And, you know, we don't have to take on some Herculean task when we don't have to. I just recently watched the movie Hercules, and he kills a snake with like 7 heads and then 7 more, and eventually he kills a big giant bad monster, right? And that's awesome, and we all go, ah! If you're a guy, you go, ah! Because we all want to kill big bad monsters, because, but we as Christians don't have to take on some huge monster task to make a huge impact. I've made a huge impact by just looking at my coworkers, and they're like, man, I can't get a ride. And be like, I got you. Can you wait half an hour, and then I'll get off of my shift, and I can take you home. That's not a problem. It's the price of gas. And then when you're driving home, they're like, oh man, I'm so thankful. And you're like, oh, no, not a problem. And then guess what? When you're driving, they'll start talking. And they'll start telling you about their lives, and then they'll open up to you. So then that's another opportunity too for you to just learn about their lives. And if you worked with them for a while, I have coworkers that have kids. I'm like, how are your kids doing? How's school? And so that relationship is continuing, and you just continue the relationship. And then guess what? They don't say, oh, Graham's a hateful Christian. They say, no, Graham loved me, and Graham cared about me, and Graham cared about me so much that he would wait until after his shift was over to give me a ride home. And then he would go out of his time and spend time in his day and sacrifice for me to make sure that I was home, and that I was home at a reasonable hour, so that way I could be there when my kid gets off the bus. And that's a thing. So that's not a huge task for me. I mean, I like to drive. So I like to drive, and I like people generally. So I think it's great. But guess what? To that person that only has one car and both parents are working jobs, that's a huge deal to them, because that guy wants to be home for his kid that got out of school to help him with homework. So that's not a Herculean task for me, but to him that means the world. And if we can find ways to reach others where they're at, and really where they're at, and what their wants and desires and their needs are, if we can find ways to meet them there, it doesn't have to be huge. I don't have to buy him a car. I can just give him a ride. It's the difference there. We don't have to buy someone a brand new Toyota Tundra, but I can give them a ride in my Avalon. See the difference there? But to them it's the same. And that's what matters, is we don't have to do these huge, massive things. It's what matters to you. And then that goes back into that. If we don't have a relationship, it doesn't matter. And that's what Paul talks about. He talks about with the Jews, I act like a Jew. And so that way I don't offend. The underlying thing is so I don't offend them, honestly, in my opinion, is through this whole thing is like, I don't want to offend a Jew, so I can't tell him the gospel. I don't want to offend a Gentile, so I can't tell them the gospel, because if I offend them and then I can't tell them the gospel, I've done a horrible job. And so that causes relationships, that needs relationships. We have to have relationships with unbelievers, so we can tell them about the gospel, and so we can love them. And the truth is, you may be the only light or the only bright spot they see all week. We don't know that. A lot of times you won't know what goes on at a person's house. A lot of times you won't know what a person's going through relationally. A lot of times you won't know about their familial struggles, or if someone died, so you won't know that. But just act like everyone's going through something, because everyone is. Everyone's going through something. You're either in a hurricane, going into a hurricane, or just coming out of a hurricane. It's one of those three. And not to be cynical or anything, but that's just the way that life is. Life is hard. We brought sin into the world, so life is difficult. And because of the choices we make, and we're sinful beings, because of the sinful choices we make, that causes more pain and suffering and all that. And it's a never-ending cycle until Jesus comes back. But lastly here is whatever it takes is the third point. But verse 19, can you go back, Dawn? I didn't tell you this before the sermon. Can you go back to verse 19, Dawn or Tina? Thank you. And it says, even though I'm a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. So Paul says, I'm not a slave. I don't have a master. I'm a free man. I can go anywhere. I can do anything I want. And as a Christian, you have that. You're free. And in this country, you're free. You know, we have those freedoms and those rights that we are blessed with. But other people don't have those in our own country. And so we need to make sure that we take those rights seriously, one. But two, what Paul says is that I've become a slave to Christ. So it's not that I'm a slave. I've chosen this. I've made a choice to follow God. And because I've made a choice to follow God, I'm going to follow him to the best of my ability. And I'm going to put myself lower than others, like Jesus did when he washed his disciples' feet. That is the lowliest job and the lowliest thing you can possibly do, is wash somebody else's feet. I'm a slave to the gospel. Whatever it takes to share the gospel, that's what I'll do, short of sinning ourselves, you know. And so whatever it takes to get someone else to hear about the name of Jesus, that's what we need to do. Because if not, it doesn't matter. I mean, we can walk through our lives in our lovely little Christian area and everyone will be, oh, I'm praying for you. And that's great. And we should pray for each other and just walk around in our little Christian holy huddle and never engage with the outside world. But that's not what Jesus called us to. The Great Commission says, go and make disciples of all nations. And it sure as heck doesn't say, go into churches and make disciples of all nations. It says, go into the world and make disciples of all nations. So whoever that is, whatever religion that is, it doesn't matter. Are you saved or not? Because that's the only thing I see. I don't see anything else. Are you Christian or not? That's the only thing that matters in this. And because we're servants and slaves to Christ, it's not that we made the choice, right? And so there are sacrifices that need to be made, and there are sacrifices that we choose to make. But because we're servants and slaves to Jesus, we want others to come in and know this joy and the peace that passes all understanding. We want others to come in to our family, and we want to just join them together with us, right? And just hold hands and lock arms with them. And, you know, when your brother falls, you pick him up. You don't let him stay down. You pick him up, you know. And we want to join together with you. And that's why we're slaves to Christ, because we know the joy and the peace and the eternal resting place that we all have. And so that's the thing, is we'll do whatever it takes to share the gospel. But first, you got to get out of your Christian bubble. Because if you're walking around with a bunch of Christians, they're already safe. So, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Not that we don't need Christian support. Like I said, you do need support of other Christians. But if you're only ever around Christians, you need to expand your horizons a little bit. And, you know, we need to de-weird Christianity to those, because they expect us to walk around in our Christian holy huddle, right? And then lastly, we need to do whatever it takes, short of sinning, to share the gospel. Someone, I forget the exact quote, but someone said that they wanted their church an inch from hell. I want to get as close to the lost people as I can, and I want to be the last one they see. I want to grab them and pull them into church, you know. I want to tell them about Jesus. That's the imagery that we really need to have, is that hell's right here and I'm stopping you. You can go, but I'm telling you about Jesus before you do. You know, we need to do whatever it takes short of hell itself to tell others the gospel. And if you've never accepted Jesus into your heart, and this is a sermon directed more towards Christians than unbelievers, but if you'd like to come into this family and you'd like to be a member of our family, the body of Christians, all you have to do is pray a prayer. And it's not a magic prayer. It's not, there are no special words. It's not a rite. It's not anything like that. It's just a prayer, and it just goes something like this. So if you just bow your heads with me, we're gonna pray. And if you would like to accept Jesus into your life, into your heart, and just pray with me, we're gonna be silent. Then we'll close. And if you've never accepted Jesus, just pray something along the words that I'm about to say. Just say, "Dear Jesus, I want to accept you as Lord and Savior into my life. I want you to be Lord of it, and I want you to come in, and I want you to help me know my flaws, and I want you to come in and show me my weakness. I want to follow you with all my heart, and today I give my life to you. I want to be a servant to you, Father. And I know your Son died on the cross for me, and I'm thankful for that. So I'm going to give us a couple moments to pray, and after that, I'll pray us out, and we'll be dismissed for the day. And dear Father, I just thank you for bringing us together here today. I thank you for this wonderful church family that we've been gifted with. I thank you for allowing us all to come here and just learn about your word, Father. And I thank you for just loving us enough to send your Son to die for us. I thank you for the country that we live in, even though there's turmoil and strife. I thank you for the freedoms that you've allowed us to even meet here. I know there are brothers and sisters all over the world that are being persecuted right now. And Father, I just pray that you give us a great week this week and bring us all back safely and help us find those who don't know you, God. And it's in Christ Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So we really appreciate y'all being here. God bless you big time. Go give them heaven.